you're on Chiefs, but then you're on Winterfox. So what's the sort of timeline there?
I think it was around June. Yeah, around June is when they asked me like they like told me their plan essentially. Um, and it's a funny thing because back then we actually had a plan to move to Europe firstly before Winterfox, and it was like a really really weird
As
crazy
Chiefs
thing that
or
just happened. As the Winterfox lineup because that's when
right?
they offered me.
Oh, I see.
Um, and yeah, we're actually planning to join some European organization back then, and which was like Torpedo or something like that. And that's when the whole gambling thing happened, where Valve shut down all the gambling servers, and that like messed with us. And within like a month, we managed to secure spot in a US team essentially with an EPL, and yeah, we managed to get in that. So that was just a bit hectic and yeah, crazy.
Okay, so it wasn't like around the time where you were still playing with Chiefs where you actually knew that you were going to Winterfox. There wasn't really that much of a crossover, right? When you were
No, it
playing
was
in
just near the
ANZ
end of it.
Champs, yeah, you would have like still assumed that okay, I'm going to go and play in ANZ Champs finals with Chiefs.
Yeah, just towards the end of it, pretty much is what I
Because
remember.
from what I remember, that first season of ANZ Champs had like this weird format where you played like weekly, and if you won the
Right.
week, you qualified for the final, I think. And I'm pretty sure Chiefs would have won like one of the earlier qualifiers and didn't need to play in the later ones. So maybe you
Yep.
like won in week 1 or 2, and then by week 4 or 5, like things had changed, and you obviously went to Winterfox. But I
Yep.
think there's
Exactly.
there's not too much need to necessarily touch on that sort of time period. I think what is really interesting for people is probably this whole Winterfox discussion. So oh man, where do you really start with Winterfox, right? This was obviously supposed to be an Australian super team from the outset, right? So were you like, because okay, don't take this personally or don't take this the wrong way, but it seems strange that you, as an individual, were chosen to go onto this roster when you were, because even still, like in mid sort of late 2016, you're only about a year or a year and a half into your career when there's players like Emag, there's players like Ofnu and APOC, or maybe Ofnu wasn't around as long as well as APOC and EMAG, but these guys certainly around a long time. You got that old immunity core, so there's a lot of players that have a lot more experience than you and that have been around a lot more. But what is the reason? Like, why is Dexter chosen for this team as opposed to some of these more experienced players?
From what I remember, I think I was still second choice to someone else. I can't really remember who, but this person might have just. I'm not sure who. I'm trying to remember, but anyway, yeah, it was just like definitely weird because I just came into the scene, but I guess it was they were really desperate for an AWPer, and I was AWPing for Chiefs and in-game leading at the same time back then. So I figured like they just like made sense in their head. It's like, all right, just got to get this guy because he's the next best AWPer, I guess.
So, what did you think of like? I mean, I guess at the time for you guys, it would have been like a really exciting time. You would have been really keen. You would have felt like, yeah, we can go over to NA and we can do some damage, or maybe, at least get some experience or something like that. But I think when you look back at it in hindsight, when we know what happened with the Winterfox roster inevitably, it seems like it might have been a year too soon for like a second, quote unquote, the second best ANZ team, right? Considering obviously Renegades was still a thing, right? So you guys were like the second best ANZ team and you went over. It just feels like maybe was it a little bit too soon, or is that just a public perception and it wasn't kind of like that for you guys as players?
I think everyone had the right amount of skill to compete individually with a lot of the NA teams, but I think there was like a really key thing that we lacked back then, which was leadership. And literally all five players, there was no leadership within the team at all. So that every other week we were changing roles and whatnot, and who was in game leading, who wasn't, and then like because there was no one that we were like, all right, do this, it's set in stone. It was like that's why the roster just like completely fell apart. And then when you don't have leadership, you have like almost mini um, teams of plays like going against the others, and that even plays into the way the houses were set up and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of that whole experience, it was definitely like learning from people rather than learning CS.
So was it maybe not like immaturity, but like you as individuals and as a team kind of needed that experience to be able to sort of hit the next level as people, and it wasn't necessarily as players, but really was more so as people.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, yeah, learning because we like just was missing so many things, and once you like been there for like 3, 4 months and just realize that all these things are missing, you're just like,
Mm,
wow, for an actual team to actually progress and do well, you need these like really small, like just human things. And obviously, after I did my like whole uni like course and I did like lots of management stuff, I was like, oh yeah, I can compare these two together. And I was like, wow, management and leadership is so crucial towards
mm.
like achieving goals, and that's what we didn't have at all in our team.
Okay, so not only that, right, but you also have so much more pressure on you, right? There's obviously the fact that you guys maybe have these internal issues, but then you've gone over to North America, so the stakes are higher, right? You played in some of these EPL qualifiers and whatever. E-League qualifiers. Don't really think there's too much to touch on there. You didn't manage to sort of do too much in those. But obviously, you played in ESL Pro League, and I think this is where some of the problems start to arise, at least from the public perception of the Winterfox Australia roster. So I can remember back in the day, there was a very negative opinion of the Winterfox roster. I felt like, at least, from the North American fans, right? Because you guys had come in, no one knew who the fuck you were. Obviously, the Aussies knew, but the North American fans definitely had no idea who you were. And then, not only that, you also just like basically boot the old Winterfox roster out and take their EPL slot. So people are already kind of pissed about that. Was that like something that sort of hit you guys pretty hard internally? Like, was that outside pressure? And not only obviously that outside pressure from North America, but even from Australia, right? Everyone's watching this team. Everyone wants this team to kind of succeed. Is there like an air of public pressure coming into the North American Pro League?
Honestly, no. I like there there should have been, but I don't think anyone really in that team felt that pressure that, oh, right, we've got to actually be the best and whatnot while we were overseas versing other teams. I think that only that pressure was felt when we returned back to Australia and had to play some qualifiers, and that's where we crumbled. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later on as
yeah.
well, because that obviously comes after you've played ESL Pro League. You also alluded to the accommodation situation there, and I don't really know what ended up kind of happening. I do just remember, like, because this was so long ago, I just remember like seeing tweets and stuff about something being wrong with the accommodation. Like, was there not accommodation when you arrived, or what was going on there?
Um, I think there was, but basically the way it was set up was it was me, Emag, and Brian, the owner of Winterfox, in one house, and the other three in the other house. And instantly, it was pretty stupid. Was that because Brian, the owner, was in this house, it's obviously going to be nicer, and it's in a much better location. It's like right next to shops, it's right next to food, it's right next to cafes, it's right next to the train station that we had to take in nearly every day. And then the other guys like had to do at least a 1 kilometer walk every time to get food, to get train station, and plus their house didn't have aircon. It was like, I don't know, it was like a meth house, it looked like
So
pretty
it
much. So
it
yeah.
kind of makes like two camps within the roster, right? You got
Yeah.
Zusi, Ofnu, and APOC who are like hating life, and you and Emag are kind of just cruising along pretty happy. And
Yeah.
that's obviously, is that what's kind of causing some of these internal issues?
I don't think anyone like had any like jealousy or anything like that towards each other because of the housing situation, but I think it was mostly um despised towards the owner, if anything,
Mm-hmm.
because he's like obviously didn't really care for anyone else if he did this and then all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it definitely separated the way a house and team should work essentially, and yeah.
Yeah. So that's really weird though, like that it's two houses. Was it like two, like maybe 2 or 3 bedroom kind of places, not like one big mega house, what you normally see these days?
Yeah, it was two like apartments basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, just two 3 bedroom apartments. And yeah, just one was like to put in the scale, like imagine one was at least, I don't know, $600 paid per week, and the other one would have been like 350
Right.
for the same thing. So that's how bad the difference would have been.
Well, that's some context that I didn't really know about. So I think that's kind of cool, interesting to kind of consider. Anyway, so we haven't even talked about any of the results that you guys had, apart from maybe briefly touching on the E-League quals, which you didn't manage to qualify for. But ESL Pro League Season 4. So you obviously take the previous Winterfox slot. You're that AU team that everyone's sort of hating on. And in the end, you actually come 10th place, which is like overall not too bad of a result. And when you look at the teams that you ended up beating, you beat Complexity, Selfless, Splice, and E United. And this was like, I think the Splice that had Machine Gun in it as well. So it wasn't like you guys lost to like even the weakest teams, right, in the region. But from my perspective, or like before I sort of went back and researched this, I remember you guys doing really badly over in North America. But now that I look at that result, I actually think like in hindsight, it actually doesn't seem like that bad of a result. So was that something that you guys were expecting? Like, did you kind of look at that game, or sorry, that season as like, you know, we just want to sort of establish our place. We just want to keep our place in Pro League.
Yeah, definitely. I think 10th was pretty okay. Like it was right in the middle or something like that, almost just a bit worse. But I think
It was
there was a
14,
few
10 out of
losses.
14.
Okay.
So you beat
Not in the
four
middle.
teams. Yeah.
Okay. I think there was like a couple of losses that would have secured us. Like if we won them, we would have gotten at least 7th or 8th,
Mm-hmm.
and those losses kind of like stewed in everyone's minds a lot more, pretty much. But yeah, I think it was okay, but we were expecting a lot more from ourselves.
Right. So you were actually just below then CLG, which you guys went 9 and 17, and CLG went 10 and 16, and then just below that Echo Fox roster as well, which was like Sean Gares' roster. So yeah, I mean, I guess you were sort of around the middle of the pack. And what's interesting that I thought in particular when I again went back and looked at this was that the teams that you beat and some of the teams that you were sort of close to had current like top professional players in them. The ones that, you know, at the time were not considered the best players in the North American region. But you look back now and you're like, okay, well, some of these teams had, I think Breezy was on one of those teams. You know, so these kinds of players that are now considered up towards the top of the North American scene. So I want to know, like, what do you think it would have happened, right? Let's say Dexter, obviously you ended up moving on from the Winterfox roster before they kind of crumbled a little bit. But let's say you stay on that roster and you stay with this team. Where would that team be at now if you had have stayed in North America and played in ESL Pro League? Do you think you would be like somewhere at the level maybe of a Team Liquid or an Evil Geniuses or something like that?
If the whole roster stayed together.
I mean, maybe obviously you make roster changes over time, but let's just assume you had your career in North America. Are you that player that now is in one of the top North American teams?
Probably. At this point in my like career, you can really see, I guess, the skill differential a lot. But I guess other things you can't see, like communication and attitude and whatnot.
Mhm.
But I think at this point, if I stayed and then I was like playing like my heart out and all that kind of stuff, probably. But I think I definitely learnt more from getting replaced on that roster than I would have if I stayed. So
Mm.
I'm not too sure, honestly, because that part was definitely my biggest learning point in my life, probably.
Okay, let's talk about that then. Was there like this ego? You know, was Dexter a very egotistical player because you just got picked up to the Australian super team? You're playing in North America. Surely you think you're better than all the other guys that are staying back in Australia.
As a team, we did, but I don't think individually, I didn't have anything too crazy going on. I was just like, all right, I played good, but nothing like, oh, you suck. Everyone sucks.
Okay,
Nothing like
so you play your season of Pro League or whatever, and you come back to Australia, and you've already sort of mentioned this is where things get a bit interesting, maybe for the roster. So you've had all of these problems prior, and then you come back and you play the DreamHack Las Vegas qualifiers, and again, you know, you are the best team. You should be winning this tournament, but you end up losing to Chiefs. You got through to the grand final of the qualifier, but you lost to Chiefs, and they were even playing with a couple of subs at the time. I think they had Iron and SK instead of it would have been Tux and maybe Pex or Tux and Ins, whoever it was. I think it was Tux and Ins that got replaced by Iron and SK. Doesn't really matter too much. You lost to Chiefs, who had 2 roster changes. So this seems like a result where Winterfox, as you guys as a team, are not going to be very happy with that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the whole season, everyone there's like a whole tension stewing in the air already about the team within ourselves. So when we were coming
Because
into
of the
that
results,
tournament,
or
because of the results, the way we dealt with things, just even the house, maybe not really, not too much of the house, but like just small little things basically, and the separation, I guess that's a better way to put it, the separation of two sides of the team being put against each other essentially. Um, that all stewed into like a really weird mentality going into that qualifier. And then from there, obviously we're like just I don't know, it felt so weird. I remember playing it because at that point I was already thinking I was being removed from the lineup anyway. And in my head is like this is my last chance and whatever because I was already inexperienced
hmm.
as hell and it was like oh this is my last chance to prove myself and all this stuff and yeah pretty much playing that everyone just had the lowest amount of energy going into that game those games and yeah we ended up losing to um that Chiefs lineup which we shouldn't have like any team shouldn't have but yeah felt bad.
Definitely. So yeah, obviously this is basically where you got replaced, and you say you sort of knew that that was coming. Was there ever like, did you have a return ticket to North America, like for example, or was everyone not? Did everyone not have a return ticket or something like that?
I don't think anyone had a return ticket.
Hmm.
There was just firstly the energy we
Like
could
you can
feel
tell,
was
right?
just like yeah, you can tell like oh just, I'll say hi to someone in the scrims and then or something like that and no one would say hi or um like just before we left America to go back to Australia, no one said bye to each other. And it was just like that really like
Hmm.
various energy plus like every time I'd play a pug in Australia, someone would say like, "Oh, when's this other player replacing you?" I was like, "All right, whatever." And then yeah, it just kept going on, and then yeah.
All right. Well, when you say this other player, it ended up being Raz that replaced you. So
hmm
did people like? Was there like some leak there, or did people know that it was Raz, or was it just like kind of like in a sense like cyberbullying kind of BS? Like, oh, when's X replacing you, or when's Y replacing you? It wasn't. Was it specifically people knew Raz was replacing you, or just random players being
I think
chosen by whoever it was?
I think some specific players within the scene definitely knew, like
Right.
Lightstep knew. So before each game or whatever, he would say, or not each game, but like some games or whenever I had interaction with him, he'd say that to me or say that to us. I remember we played at a scrim before the qualifiers, and then he'll be like, "Oh yeah, when's Dexter getting replaced?" in the all chat and all this kind of
Mm.
stuff. And yeah,
So seems like people knew before you knew. Like
well,
you
I
sort of
definitely knew, but I
knew,
was
but you weren't
suspecting it.
told.
But yeah, yeah,
Okay.
basically.
All right. Well, that's obviously awkward. Just to be playing in a environment like that, I imagine. What do you think of that in hindsight? You know, because like I'll give you my opinion. It seems like a dumb decision to replace you with Raz in hindsight, right? At the
Mm,
time, I think I probably would have said, you know what? I think Raz is probably a better, solid, more solid AWPer than Dexter. He's got a bit more experience. And if you remember at the time, that was when Raz was like literally popping the fuck off in Parallax. Like
yeah.
he was insane. So it seemed like a great idea at the time. In hindsight, you're probably the best player in the country, or at least people say that at the moment. And Raz obviously not playing anymore. So in hindsight, it seems like a dumb idea. But what did you think of it at the time? What do you think of it now?
At the time, I definitely knew I wasn't a strong AWPer. I definitely knew I was a much stronger lurker and rifler. And it pretty much showed in a lot of my games where I'd have to pick up a rifle randomly, and then I'd clutch a 1v3 or 1v2 instantly and whatever. Um, and I guess when the whole team crumbled as well, everyone was kind of like individually like kind of saying sorry to me almost. They're saying like, "Oh, we should have removed this player instead because we knew you were a much better rifler." Because pretty much I was the new guy. Everyone's experienced. Everyone's got their um, links in the team, like, and like you can't kick this player because he's best friends with the boss almost and whatever. So it's like I'm the next player that we have to make a decision, and then yeah, that's just happened. I knew I was still much better than a lot of the other players, but yeah.
Okay, so this is a question that I haven't written down. This is one that I've just come up with as we've been
Mm.
talking. And you can say no if you don't want to answer this. But would you ever want to play with any of these players again? Because you haven't actually gone and played with any of those guys since that Winterfox roster. So what if someone comes around and says, we're going to make Winterfox 2? Like, okay, let's say Renegades, for example. Obviously, you're going to say no. Let's say Renegades doesn't exist. Let's say you're teamless right now, and Winterfox comes and says you want to make Winterfox 2. You can have a spot in North America Pro League. Would you do it again?
Probably
with those
not.
players?
Probably not.
Okay.
I think they have their own team culture style, and I have my own idea of team culture, and I don't think that would match. They're definitely better and changed people and whatever, but yeah, just the whole team culture wouldn't have worked out, and yeah.
Do you think maybe one of the issues was that you're all kind of strong personalities? Like, I don't know most of these guys like super individually as people, but I see you as a strong personality. Emag obviously ended up going on to lead the order roster for quite a while. APOC definitely, an in-game leader-esque kind of a player sometimes, and he's, I think, a big personality in some of the teams that he's in. So is that part of the issue? Or was it, I mean?
I'm not too sure here because the thing we lacked was like leadership in that team. So I feel like if anything, no one had enough of the right qualities to lead a team, if anything. But I'm not too sure about personalities.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a weird one because I don't know. Everyone had a different personality that didn't match with anyone else's. So some people would match together, like definitely APOC and Ofnu. They've been good mates forever.
Mhm.
But like, for example, it wouldn't match with my personality and whatnot, which is fine. But yeah, it's just the whole experience. That's what I learned from basically. Just like you need people to match with you in terms of personality to make a team work.
Which is interesting as well, but given, what ended up happening with you joining Greyhound and that being very much like a kind of best mates kind of culture or whatever what ended up being, at least from your perspective. Anyway, do you think maybe like the now Dexter, this current version of you, like if you're in that Winterfox roster, like do you take the reins and do you be the leader? Do you be that guy that the Winterfox team needed? And was it just a case that there wasn't enough experience in that roster to sort of take the reins? Because I feel like now you're kind of the guy that doesn't put up with much shit. And if you were in the current Winterfox roster, you probably would be like, listen, guys, this is fucked.
Yeah, I definitely would. I've definitely got my own like problems and issues, I guess, as a person, but at least I am able to realize that and speak about that confidently.
Sure.
So I think that skill that I've developed and all the other skills with experience and whatnot, I definitely would have stepped up and like, here, this is the thing, this is what we need to do. And I think that was already in me because it was like a discussion where I remember back then where we were swapping in game leaders for like the third or fourth time. And I was like, I just like put my hand up like a little bit. I was like, yeah, I'll play, or something like that. But no one even considered me as an in-game leader back then. And
I mean, I
then,
think you were very new to Counter-Strike, I guess, in comparison to some of the players on that roster. How old would you have been, by the way, when you were in Winterfox?
I guess in terms of just, I think
It's 4 years ago,
still like
4.5 years ago.
21 probably. I'm still old.
I mean, I'm 25 now. I think we're pretty much the same age.
Yeah.
So I think if I go back and look at my experiences and my life as a 21-year-old versus where I'm at now, I wouldn't have been a leader in a position like that when I was 21. But I think now, and that's, I assume the same for you, right? As a person, as an individual, you were the new young guy. It's very hard to step up and be kind of a leader in that respect. So, I mean, I guess you got to get a pass mark for that. Anyway, look, I think that's enough about the Winterfox situation. Very interesting, though. I really feel like that's a period of time in not only your career, but like everyone's career. I feel like everyone's kind of forgotten about Winterfox, right, in the AU scene.
Yeah, definitely. I don't really care. So I'm like, all right.
You want to forget it.
I want to forget it personally.